The Morristown Green, a central park echoing with the footfalls of Washington and his compatriots during the Revolutionary War, is not merely a serene escape, but a living testament to the town's pivotal role in shaping our nation. Morristown's history seamlessly intertwines with every individual who grew up there, creating a childhood rich in the echoes of the past and a vibrant spirit of community carried forward by each successive generation. These are their stories. This is Beyond the Green.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Green, where we talk about the people and places of Morristown. My name is Peter, Morristown High School class of 1990, and Stanley Tucci's love child is...
And I'm Satiri, or Terry, Morristown High School class of 1987.
Hey, folks, thanks for joining us again. Today is a special day. It is our one-year anniversary here at Beyond the Green. And for today's special episode, please help me welcome 1987 graduate of Morristown High School, Jim Myers. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Jim, thanks for making it out. So, Jim, growing up, you are a native of Morris Plains.
I am. Yep.
Born and raised and still living there.
Correct. Yep.
So, growing up there, I've driven through. Not a lot has changed over the last 50 so years. Some things have.
Mm-hmm.
But would you say things are pretty much the same?
Yeah, a little bit more crowded. It's grown up a little bit from back in the day.
Yeah.
But it's a great place to grow up. As most people remember, we were the Boro Beavers, joining all the kids from Frelinghuysen. So we only had about 80 kids in our class.
Right.
So when we all went up to Morristown, we were the small group joining the big group, and you would know some kids from sports or from cousins and things like that. But you kind of moved into Morristown. It was just all coming into this big group that all went to school together for how many years.
Yeah.
But back then, Morris Plains, it was a quiet place to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
When I say everyone knew everyone, you did. We had a great class. A lot of guys that in my class, Dennis Molnar, Eric Ambler, the Bonanos, the Bazas, a lot of the guys that you'd probably remember from growing up in different sports, and everyone knew each other. Nights that I can remember having sleepovers at a friend's house and driving down through town along Speedwell in the middle of the night, sneaking out of the house and driving down to Dunkin' Donuts to get
Sure.
get something in the middle of the night and getting back before the parents realized we were gone.
Yeah.
But it was you could do that back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And the funny thing is about for those who don't live in the area and are watching this, one of the things going down Central Avenue and you go down there where Greystone was.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably one of my things that I regret the state government of New Jersey is taking down Greystone.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a building that a lot of people don't know. At first, it was built, I believe, in the late 20s, early 30s. It was Art Deco architecture. But before the Pentagon was built, it had the largest single-pore foundation in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I'm sure they got, whatever money they did to sell it off. If they had just maintained that, I think it would have been a great touristy place for people to go. I don't know. What are your feelings about that?
Look, not only a tourist attraction, it would have been an incredible college campus.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you remember going up Central Avenue and you had all the doctors' homes on either side, and you finally got up to the main building of the hospital, it was gorgeous. I know that with asbestos and a lot of other
Sure.
issues, the saving it was a lot more expensive than actually taking it down.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
the beauty of losing it is probably the gain of the county with all the county fields
100%.
because
100%.
that is wonderful. But to your point, it had the largest underground network next to the Pentagon.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that back before it became unfashionable for
Mm-hmm.
for patients to work, the patients worked the land.
Yeah, they had the farm right there.
They had the farm. They had if you go up into any of the woods around there
Mm-hmm.
and like with a metal detector, you will find old scythes. You'll find old tools and from that were there from that period of time.
Yeah.
The reservoir, which is as you're on as you come up Grannis and you're
Yeah.
heading towards into the up, there's two ponds on your right hand side.
Okay.
Those are the old reservoirs. That dam was built at the close of the Civil War.
Wow.
At the same time that they built Greystone.
Yeah.
And so that is, the Industrial Revolution. So that history is there. And then what a lot of people don't realize is Arlo and Woody Guthrie, the
Mm-hmm.
singers.
Yeah.
Okay, so the father was in Greystone, and he was actually in Ward 40, and he actually wrote a poetry book while he was there called Wardy 40,
Mm-hmm.
and the Guthrie family came up and took the door from Ward 40. It's now in the Guthrie Family Museum. But Bob Dylan would take the train to Morristown or Morris Plains from New York.
Yeah.
He would sleep in the Morris Plains train station.
Yeah.
He would walk up and meet with him because he was his mentor.
What?
And so Bob Dylan, and as you come up, the trees are still there because the
Yeah.
Guthrie family would picnic under the trees in front
Okay.
of the hospital.
Yeah.
There's two trees that kind of come up, wrap over, and the branches go back into the ground. I can't remember what the name of them are. There's one on either side. And the Guthrie's named the Magicy trees. And those were, so you have Industrial Revolution history. You have healthcare history because it was one of the leading psychiatric hospitals in the country at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You have pop culture because of Dylan and the Guthries. It's amazing history right there that very few people even know that exists.
Mm-hmm. As a kid, would you go? Now, I've heard a lot of stories where, they have those little cottages spread around the woods there, on the periphery of the main campus. As kids, would you go explore those?
So you explored the whole area, and you were always in the woods around there.
Okay.
It's funny because everyone will talk about the tunnels,
Mm-hmm.
and 90% of the people who talk about the tunnels probably never went in the tunnels but it was still the story that they did.
Okay.
But the tunnels were just actually transport between the buildings.
Sure. Okay.
And a lot of storage. So
Okay.
it wasn't like it was any, crazy nefarious like testing zones or anything like that, right?
Right.
They were
Right.
just
Right.
there. But the big place that we would go was up on the hill, and unfortunately now there is beautiful views, but the god awful apartment building or condos that are up that you can
Yeah.
see from New York City.
Yeah.
Everywhere around, you can look up and see them on the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
That was Rock Castle,
Okay.
and that was just pathways. And there was a place called Flat Rock that you could go up and oversee all of New York from. There was the Stone Steps, and the Stone Steps, thank God, are still there. But a lot
Yeah.
of Rock Castle was ripped out to build those condos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of Morris Plains kids would go hike and explore up
Yeah.
there.
And then and this is probably right after you graduated, where they started developing the mountain, and
Correct.
people go up to the power lines,
Yep.
and and that was a thing that we're gonna go up to the power lines and hang out and do whatever we're gonna do up there,
Yeah.
And
So
then
they were on the backside.
they were on the
Yep.
backside, exactly. And when
Yep.
you're coming down when you're coming off, is that Mountain Ave up there? Is that what that is?
Mountain Way.
Mountain Way. And you can come off of Route 10, you come back, you cut that as it takes you, and you go that way. And every once in a while, I'll go that way just for shits and giggles. And when you think about what it was 30, 40 years ago,
Yeah,
and now you're like, these houses now are 30 years old,
sure.
and you're like, oh, okay, nice,
Now,
but
if you go up that way
yeah,
to the top,
yeah,
past the houses, there's a playground.
yeah, yes,
Okay. So if you go in from the playground, there's some incredible stone formations back in there.
okay,
But if you go across the street, you walk up there to the right. Someone has put a little stone pyramid there, but
yeah,
at that stage, you can turn left, and there's what's called the stone steps, and it's a set of staircase all the way up the side of the mountain. Now, there's a lot of theories where it came from. A lot of people say it was one of Washington's follies to
mhm,
give his troops something to do, and then
sure,
it put them up at a lookout so they could see all of New York from there. But for instance, there's you'll see like steel pipes that are put down to hold the steps in place.
okay,
Well, they were put in like back in the 30s and early 40s, like by the Cub Scouts, like by my
okay,
father's Cub Scout group and things like that. Yeah.
wow,
So I mean, they've been there forever, and thank God that still exists.
yeah. Jim, what you're telling me here is in the future we need to take a field trip,
Yeah,
and we need to
Yeah.
go out and document all
Do,
this.
do you
absolutely.
when we were talking about the Greystone, the main building, do you remember in 2009 when it was featured in a couple of episodes of House?
Yes.
When House was big back then, he was in the plot. They thought he was crazy or something, and he went there, and they filmed at least the front of it, and then they actually had it set up where he waited at the bus stop they had there, and they had the bus come up as part of the
Right.
script to do that. And I remember seeing that and going, "Oh my God, they're going to have this on a show."
Right.
Yeah.
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 So when we were kids, um, through church at St. Virgil's, we would go up and do Christmas pageants
Hmm.
in the main, because as you walk into the main building, I mean, it was gorgeous. There was Tiffany lamps. There was Tiffany. It was gorgeous, and then there was a chapel, and we would go and do Christmas pageants for the patients.
Wow.
With
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Jim, all so I'm gonna make I'm gonna make the assumption that you're one of these guys that you talk about the tunnels because you've been in the tunnels.
uh, never went in.
No,
Never went in.
never
No,
know.
Not as
no.
Okay,
far as you know. That's
I,
what's
I
what.
yes,
lived.
yeah,
I
plausible
lived.
deniability.
I lived over by the firehouse,
Okay,
Morristown firehouse, and we had what's called across where American Road is now,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and so that growing up, that was called the sand pits,
yes, yeah,
and that's kind of where we would go down and we'd cross over into the sand pits, and that'd be from there you could cut back over to Court and back over towards where Community Park was. So
yeah.
you kind of take that pathway along the railroad tracks. Yeah,
So, did you live close enough where you can smell the tea from Tetley?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. On a if it was a humid day,
yeah.
Mars Plains smelled like a teacup.
Oh, 100%. That was the best.
Yeah,
Ah, you just brought it
yeah,
all in.
yeah. It was,
Um, but let me just I knew a nurse who worked at Greystone, and she would tell me stories that working the night shift, how haunted it was. And I don't know if you've heard stories of this, but one night she told me she was working the night shift, and she saw this gentleman at the end of the hall who kind of was just walking randomly. So she goes after him. She turns the corner, and nobody's there. Goes back to the nurse's station and starts, hey, I saw this guy, starts describing him. And one of the nurses says, it almost sounds like you're describing so and so. He just passed away last night.
oh wow.
And then she told me on another story, she was working the night shift. She was on break. They went into wherever the nurses' stations, where their break room was. Her and another nurse were watching television. And these two girls come in and sit right in front of them on the floor. And she looks at the other nurse and says, who are these girls and why are they here? And the other nurse says, I'll tell you later, just let it be. At one point in time, the one girl turned around, smiled at them, and the two of them got up and walked out. So she turns to her coworker and says, what the hell was that all about? And she goes, well, they live here. And she goes, what do you mean they live here? She goes, they died here. She goes,
Wow.
but don't say anything because not everybody sees them.
Wow.
And I'm like, I need to take a tour of this place. I got to call Peter Venkman, you
Yeah.
know, and, we're going to go in there and check what's going on here. I'm just curious if you've ever heard stories like that
Well,
before.
if you want some great history
Yeah.
about that, well, actually, really that and all of Morris County parks,
Yeah.
Dave Helmer.
I know
Dave.
Dave. Yeah, Dave Helmer
Yep.
is head of the Parks Department now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Dave graduated in '84.
84. Yeah. I have his card.
Yep. Scott
Yeah.
was in our class.
Yeah.
And so Dave, I mean, he was involved in the whole transition, and he's a great person for history there.
Excellent. That's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So let's move on now and let's talk about going from being a beaver to a colonial.
To a colonial. Yeah.
So you start high school, so that's going to be fall of 83.
hmm
Culture shock for you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, yes, much bigger. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
you went from a small school and 80 kids that you went from all the way through with. Actually, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. There was two at the time. There was two elementary schools in Morris Plains.
Mm-hmm.
There was Community Park and there was Mountain Way,
Sure.
and about 40 in each. They joined to about 45 in each joined about 90 kids in my graduating class.
Okay.
And so we went then throughout, and that's from there into Morristown. But at the time, I already had two older brothers and older sister who my sister had already graduated. My two brothers were there,
Okay.
and then a whole slew of cousins.
Okay.
So I've been going there for a
Okay.
long time for sports and different things like that. So it wasn't as much of a shock, but for Morris Plains kids, yeah, it was a big change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you played football.
Mm-hmm.
Did you start as a freshman?
Well, freshman football, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not higher than that.
No. No. No.
Actually, it's funny because when I look at we started football in the summertime,
Okay.
right? Obviously, you started football camp,
Yeah.
so that was kind of our first break into Morristown High School.
Okay.
Was summer camp for football, and most of those guys it's great. I'm friends with to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just away last week with Danny Smith.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember Danny, yeah.
Yeah.
So and Danny I met that summer, and these guys I've stayed tight with ever since. It's now what are we now? We're 38 years out. So what's that? Almost 42 years ago that this was.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because we would do triple sessions back then that you're not allowed to do now, but kind of brought everyone together, and we've all, like I said, we've all stayed tight over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now your dad was on the 74 team, right?
Oh, before that, no, my dad was on the 48 championship team.
48. The 40.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And they won like you said, they won the championship.
Mm-hmm.
Was he an influence for you in playing football?
He was a major influence of getting involved
Okay.
and being involved in as much as possible.
Okay.
To whatever came along to join and be part of.
Okay.
And did he push us for football? No.
Okay.
We grew up knowing a lot of the men he played with. He played with my uncle Joe Dempsey, who was a history teacher at the high school.
Wait, Joe Dempsey is your uncle?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my mom's brother.
He
Shut
was
up,
Jim.
man. You
Jim.
don't
He
understand.
was
This
one of my
guy,
favorite
uh,
teachers. I can't
this
tell you how
guy,
much I
Oh,
this,
love Mr.
like,
Dempsey.
Jim, you're going to bring tears to my eyes now, okay? I cannot express to you how much I love that man.
Yeah,
oh,
He was,
yeah.
oh, God.
His stories of being in the Navy and flying the hunters took up like the first. It was always story time before you got to the dittos that he passed
Oh,
around.
yeah, he was a
It
great
was
guy.
yeah. That's wow. That's awesome.
and
I
you
had
know what
no
the
idea.
and you know what the funny thing is? I saw him years later. This had to be, God, I don't know how old he was. I saw him. This had to be late '90s, around the turn of the century, and I saw him at Pasta de Costa in Randolph. And it was just, when I saw him, I hadn't seen him in years. It was just one of those things, like, and his wife. I knew his wife Audrey, I believe it was,
Absolutely, yes.
and she was the library assistant at Frelinghuysen. So I had met her when I was at Frelinghuysen,
Hmm.
and then I found out, uh, I met, I think, his younger daughter. I met his older daughter. I happened to run into her at the class of '74's reunion
Who
that they
taught at
just,
Who taught
yeah.
at Frelinghuysen?
What's
Cindy
that?
Weber. Cindy
Yeah,
Weber.
and I remember Cindy as well, right? And
Yep.
so it's just you, Jim. Like, oh, God
Yeah,
damn you,
so
Jim.
cool.
But that is so awesome, dude. That is such a
Yeah.
plethora of information. And I always say, when he would talk, he was so proud of his brother, who was working. He was undersecretary for HUD under Reagan.
Wow, you're good.
And dude, dude. I'm
He
like,
says he's not TMZ, Jim, but
I know
you
everything.
wonder at
But
times.
the stories he would tell about him, and he would bring
Mhm.
in photos of his brother in the Oval Office, and he was just so proud of him. And I
Yeah.
remember this had to be now, let me think, spring of '90. So the year '89, '90, my senior year, they started, the history department was the first year they did international affairs,
Mhm.
and he taught that class. And he took us on a field trip to Manhattan because they were giving a talk about perestroika and about the Russians, and how everything is changing and the philosophy of the Russians. This is right after the Berlin Wall fell, and which was great. And then we get back a few weeks later. The Hunt of Red October comes out, and I go to, hey, Mr. Dempsey, you gonna go see the movie? He's like, he goes, I don't like to go to the movies as soon as it comes out. He goes, but I read the book, he says to me, because I think he loved Tom Clancy. And he goes, it can't be better than the book. I said, you don't know unless you go, Mr. Dempsey. I said, we can just skip class today and go up to headquarters and watch it. And he just started laughing. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, he was, and he knew. He read like you wouldn't believe.
yeah.
And but then their other his my other uncle, his other brother, other Morristown guy, was on as a young kid and he was on Okinawa,
Yeah.
and then during the war, and then after they came back, he did a career in banking.
Okay.
So yeah, but then Audrey, as you were saying, my aunt,
Yeah.
while they were on the football team, she was a cheerleader.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome, man. It's a
yeah,
small world, man. It's such a small world,
it is. It is. Well, that class, when you think about that class, so you had my dad, my uncle, then you had uh, Mr. Simmons and Mr. Vance,
Yep.
who were a big influence on a lot of people at the high school.
Yeah.
Then you had Mr. Barry, Mike Barry, and what most people, I think a lot of people don't realize is back when they were looking at making separate high schools,
Yeah.
Mr. Barry was the one who pretty much shut that down.
Okay.
He's the one who kept Morristown, and
Yeah.
it's funny because we were talking. I was kind of thinking ahead about different things at high school and where we went go to lunch and what we do, and
Hmm.
obviously Suvio's was
Yeah.
always But I don't know if you remember Frank's next door.
Yeah.
The deli.
Yeah.
Well, the Mike Barry's sons,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Barry's older brothers, okay, they bought the deli,
Oh, okay.
and so Mike and Glenn would run that, and so we would walk up there, and that's where we ate lunch almost every day. And if we didn't have money, we would either because they were big wrestlers at the high school, they were big football players at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
So if we didn't have money, we'd wash dishes. They were like, "All right, get back and clean up something for me, and I'll make you a sandwich." Or you'd have to go back there and arm wrestle them. And now they were a lot bigger than that. They would just beat the hell out of us, but we were like, "I get a free sandwich out of it. That's okay by me."
I am so happy I didn't know this at the time. Okay. I would be running back and forth in between classes, like,
Yeah.
oh, I got pots I gotta clean, you know.
Wow.
So your freshman year of who is your coach as a freshman?
Freshman year was a fellow by the name of Lugo, Mr. Lugo.
Oh, was he a
Um,
health teacher
Fred Lugo, Fred,
or
yeah,
Fred or
and
Frank?
then
Okay.
Frank, and then Mr. Santarelli, Mike's
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's dad.
They
Okay.
were the two freshman coaches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then sophomore year, Mr. Bellis, I'm assuming, Coach
Uh,
Bellis.
yeah. So Mr. Bellis, well, he by the time uh, Mr. Sharona had moved on by our junior year, and then Mr. Bellis.
Oh, so Coach Iona, you still played under Coach Iona then? Okay.
Well, yes, I didn't play under him. We were like, we were like the scrub
Yeah.
defense. But yes, and then Mr. Bellis took over.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Who I
Now,
would say, I mean, in my opinion, probably one of where I have certain teachers that influence me educationally.
yeah.
I think in just everyday life, I'd probably say he'd probably be one of the biggest influences.
Wow, that's
You
great.
know, yeah.
So looping back to your teachers, who influenced you as a teacher? Who influenced you?
I would probably say if I had to pick, I'm a huge, as you and I were talking about earlier, I'm a huge history buff.
Yeah.
And travel and everything else. And so in Boro School
Uh-huh.
and Morristown, there were two sisters
Okay.
who taught. And Miss Kelly. One Miss Kelly taught at Boro School. History.
Okay.
The other Miss Kelly taught at Morristown.
Okay.
And had them both. And now my father and mother have always been big into history, so that was kind of already ingrained. But on a school level, it was them, and they kind of helped me zero in on history. And
Nice.
I went to school for history and stayed with it my entire life.
Nice. That's great. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So now, looking back at your own football career, and your son now, Ryan, is a senior there. When you look back at your own playing days, and you look at the last 4 years for your son, could you see a transition of the sport at the high school level?
So I would say this:
Uh-huh.
I think we were very proud when we were very bad. We weren't good, but we were very proud. All right, and we were and we loved playing, loved being together,
Yeah.
and I now see that coming back, and I kind of I think I give Casey Flynn a lot of credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the fact that my dad played for his great grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
Was friends with his grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
And his family is so involved with the youth league, bringing it up. I now start seeing there's going to be now the tradition is coming back, and I think a lot of the pride of and not to say that there hasn't been for years. I mean,
Hmm.
we think of
Sure.
all the state championship teams that have come through, and a lot of the guys. I think everyone's proud of it, but I think the culture is starting to come back. I
Yeah.
mean, just if you look at from my oldest
Hmm.
to my youngest,
Hmm.
um, you would always get the kids going to the games, but slowly during the game, kids would filter off and go to where they were going to go.
Sure.
Now you see the kids staying to the end.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think the culture is really starting to come back,
Yeah. Which is great.
which is terrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, for me, football was only part of because I also swam and
Okay.
then did track and field. Well, I did the field, not the track. I wasn't.
So
But
talking about swimming, for you as a freshman in '83, arriving there, um, do you that must have been a novelty to have a indoor swimming pool?
that was wonderful. So my brothers still had to go up to the Y,
Okay.
but then the pool opened,
Yeah.
and so when I got there, everything was right there,
Yeah.
and and I think we were the envy of a lot of the schools around. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
you'd go to other schools and you'd be in a little tiny YMCA somewhere, and
Yeah.
we had this beautiful facility,
Yeah.
and and a lot of us, um, swimming is very individual sport, right?
Mhm. Sure.
But it's also a very tight sport, and through that you're competing against other schools, but you're more competing one on one, so you end up getting to know a lot of kids. And like I lifeguarded at Streeter Pool
Yeah.
for all through high school, and we had a lot of Randolph kids also work there who were also on the swim team, and so it was kind of a nice way to get to know kids from other schools. But even on this trip that we were just talking about,
Yeah.
we had uh, one we had five uh, lifeguards
Okay.
from
Wow.
Burnham and Streeter
Wow.
on this trip. Yeah, who are now a lot older with their own kids, but
Sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But that's awesome, though.
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So now here, we transition now. Uh, you graduated high school. You went to college. Um, what happened after that? Where did your life kind of take you?
So I went up to Rhode Island, went to Providence College,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do right away. So I moved out to Montana, and I joined a group called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is kind of like the Peace Corps. And I would do counseling and on the reservations around the state of Montana. Uh, Came back here, moved back into my parents' house for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
At that stage, I started working, still doing social work in Patterson, and a place called Straight and Narrow, which was
Mm-hmm.
it was an experience and definitely eye opening, but it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then I moved on, and I was actually my trajectory was I was going to go back to school. I did go back to Seton Hall for education or
Mm-hmm.
master's education. My plan was history teacher and coach,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up doing a complete turn because the whole time after I moved back, the whole time there, I always bartended,
Okay.
and I bartended at Hennessy's in Morristown.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and I did that for years and years. Well, one of my customers happened to be a vice president at a travel company,
Okay.
and he came to me. They were running the first Notre Dame Navy football game in Ireland,
Oh,
and he said, "Hey, I need somebody who knows football, knows Irish history, and can bring the two together. Would you come and work on this project?" I was like, I'll go do that for a year, go see a football game in Ireland, and I'll go
sure.
back and teach. I'll go back and teach.
Yeah.
But I never left. I stayed in hospitality ever since.
Dude, that's an awesome story. Now, did you have to wear a kilt at the football game?
No, but
Uh-oh.
the great thing was I was in charge of the planes,
Okay.
and we had to, and there was only a certain number of commercial flights that were going, so you had to charter planes to
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
And at the time, this was in '96. It apparently it ended up being the largest non-wartime movement of Americans out of the country
Really?
at that time in '96, and I was able to book this. We had this one old TWA flight
Yeah.
airplane which had the upstairs,
Yeah.
and I was like, I am never in my life going to be able to sit upstairs in a plane again. So I'm like, I'm taking one of those seats,
Yeah.
and I put a whole bunch of the Heisman Trophy winners up there with me, and so I sat up there. I'm like, this is great. Now it was an old plane, so it shook a lot going over, but it was a great experience.
Yeah. People were definitely eating their Lucky Charms that day.
Oh yeah.
Jim, when you were going to Providence College, how much time did you spend at the Abbey across the street?
We are
Oh,
TMZ. I told you.
I know. So I lived on Biltmore Avenue, which was about a mile
Yeah.
from there for a while, and we Katie Halsey and her husband used to own it, so we used to go there all the time because it was so close. They had 25 cent, 15 cent chicken wings, and
Yeah.
we used to sit there. And I'm not from a professional sports perspective, I've never watched hockey. I've gone to a lot of games, which is a whole different experience.
Sure.
But in that bar, when like the Bruins were playing, you couldn't not cheer because it was like a revival. And
Sure.
so it's still there. But I think it's funny that you said Providence College, and I'm thinking I gotta ask because it's literally right there.
Yeah. There were a lot of good spots around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So Jim, now you run your own travel business.
I do. I do. Yeah. I had left the other company back in '18, and a number of customers had asked if I could help, and I finally said I had another partner, a fellow that I used to work with in Dublin, and so
Mm-hmm.
he and I teamed up, and we started just putting together tours to predominantly to Ireland and Britain, but then we've then branched out to the rest of Europe as well,
Yeah, which is
and so
fantastic.
it's wonderful. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
enjoying it.
And you just got back from Portugal, as we were talking off air.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
do one. So it's Myers Tours. We do one tour a year for with really kind of friends and family,
Okay.
and I use that loosely because anyone who wants to join
Mm-hmm.
is welcome to join. In fact, we had people on this trip that I had never met, which was it was great because it's new friendship.
Yeah.
And but I sometimes have people from college, sometimes have people from I had two cousins on the trip this time. I had a number of high school friends that
Mm-hmm.
couple, one of which I don't think I've seen probably since high school.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
it was
awesome. But
wonderful.
that's awesome, though.
Yeah.
So, if somebody wants to book a tour with you, how can they get in touch with you?
So it's I don't want to do like shameless plugs, but it's just
I'm giving you. It's a shameless plug. Go for it.
so my email is just info at Myers Tours, MYERS
Okay.
tours.com. And we do anywhere from one person up to
Yeah.
100 people, whatever
Yeah.
the group is. And I don't like to, I used to, for my old company, write a lot of the tours for the brochures. And I
Mm-hmm.
build build the brochures, which is wonderful. And there's a place for that. I like to customize it. So I like
Sure.
to sit down with you and your family and say, what does everyone like to do?
Right.
And build something around that. We were talking about Cork earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a friend and his family, and his father went on, and he said to me at one stage, "Hey, my dad's family used to have a furniture store in Cork,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd love to just drive around Cork." And we were going to Cork anyway. And I said, "Okay." He said, "We have a picture." I said, "Oh, send me the picture." So I was able to look at the picture, and I was able to zero in and find the address.
Mm-hmm.
I went, and sure enough, it's still a furniture store.
Wow.
Different family, but still a furniture store. So I called up the store and I said, "Hey, I've got a fella coming in whose family used to own this store."
Mm-hmm.
And didn't say a word to him. And we pulled him to court. And I said, "Okay, Mr. Benjamin," I said, "I need you to come with me. You and your family come with me." And I walked him down the street. I'm like, "Here's your grandfather's store."
Uh-huh.
And like things like that that's why I love doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to that?
Oh, he cried. He loved it. He
Yeah.
loved it. And they came out, welcomed him in. They brought him in like he was their long lost relative who showed him everything, and and it was a wonderful experience.
That's extremely gratifying.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, I don't know if do you have any more questions to ask about your days in high school?
No, I was going to say when we were talking about teachers, and then obviously Mr. Dempsey. You know, I've always said, because now um, I do a lot of public speaking and so forth, and I've been offered opportunities to be almost like an adjunct professor as somebody out of industry, technology, and so forth. And there are certain teachers, Mr. Dempsey, Mr. Gomka for physics,
Sure.
that make you want to be in class, but by virtue of that, you're learning without even sometimes realizing you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I always ask that question of, when I run into teachers, or even when we talk about students, not just from our high school but other areas, whether that dynamic has changed. Individuals that this is what they love to do, and it was clear based on the way they interacted with their students, and by virtue of that, you didn't not you were excited to go to that class.
Yeah,
You
and
know
I
what I
think
mean?
that
It just
we were lucky. I think we had a lot of very very good teachers,
Yeah.
yeah,
and I mean, if you think of just for comedic was when you had like Mr. Butler,
oh
and you would sit in that art class and laugh. I mean, he was teaching you,
yeah,
but you would laugh the entire time because he
yeah,
was just so funny.
Yeah.
And but even like fast forward to these days, um, you guys did a great piece with the boys, the football team this past
Hmm.
season, and so they end each of their years where the seniors go and present T-shirts to the teachers that have influenced them the most,
Okay.
and and they and the whole video that they show at the end of the year,
Yeah.
and when you see that, you see, and it's also not just the teachers. It's when you look at Jerry, who uh, is on security. He's
Hmm.
from Madison, but he is probably Morristown's greatest fan.
Hundred
He is at
percent.
he doesn't matter what sport it is. He's there. He's
Yeah.
at every
yeah,
sport, and he influences these kids.
Yeah.
Just
His
his
presence.
being there, his
Yeah.
presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Jerry's like a Visa card. He's everywhere you want to be.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Pretty much. Great guy. Great guy. Dude, that's just amazing. Well, listen, Jim, we're kind of backing up to our time. We would love to have you back on. Just so many more stories. I didn't realize when I asked you to be on this how much of a plethora of
yeah,
information you would be. I am just listen. I'm just so grateful you could make the time for us.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
and we definitely need to do this again. Hopefully next time we'll do it in person. But I just have one more question for you before we end here. Um, Looping back to the borough, and we talked about the changes, but and I'm not going to talk about the polit. We talked about this off air about the politics with friendlies and what's happening there. But for you personally, is there any one or two places in Morristown that when they were gone saddened you?
Uh, in Mars Plains,
Yeah.
100%, I would say couple things. I mean, I would is definitely Collins.
Yeah.
Collins Pub, because it was Collins was the meeting place not only for also owned by Morristown graduate Dominic Alberta. He was a soccer player for the high school, but Collins was the meeting place for you always go in there and meet someone, whether it's for dinner or just to see people.
Mm-hmm.
Families would go in there. Where Arthur's is always the restaurant, and Arthur's is wonderful. The restaurant with a bar,
Mm-hmm.
right? Collins was the bar with a restaurant that all the locals went to.
Sure.
And in the back room at any given time was either a sports team, kids and coaches, or a coaches meeting, or
Mm-hmm.
a draft pick. There was always something going on there. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
real kind of center of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, I mean, definitely Friendlies.
Yep.
I was a paper boy, and Friendlies was on my route, and
Mm-hmm.
probably why the Fribbles did not help me.
Yeah.
But it was a great. It was that's would definitely miss that as well. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
in Morris Plains, it would be really kind of those two.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate. That was the friendlies of our youth.
Mm-hmm.
Going to that one, we grew up. Even though we grew up in the Fairchild section of the township, but
Sure.
same church, different pew type of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
Um.
my father was a Fairchild guy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually, my brother lives there, lives in Fairchild now, and but going back to Arthur's, we when you talk about Mr. Bellis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We graduated 38 years ago.
Yeah.
38 years ago, and he still meets us for dinner. We
Wow.
still get together with him and a number of guys, both football players and non-football players, and meet twice a year.
Jim, that is something that I would love to be a fly in the wall for.
Yeah, that sounds like an
Come,
episode waiting to happen, right?
come
That
and meet
is,
us.
listen, you let us know when it is,
Yeah.
okay? And oh God, the questions I could ask, my God. Uh, people be like, are they TMZ? Well, it all depends on who we talk to. But listen,
We're just
Jim, listen,
passionate. Yeah.
yeah, listen, we are just about out of time here. Once again, thank you for coming. Everybody, we will post Jim's information in the descriptions down below. Thanks, Jim Myers, Morristown High School class of 87, and a Morristown Plains Borough staple. So once again, Jim, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
My name is Peter. That's Terry. And until next time, this is Beyond the Green, and we will see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Take care.